The highway stretched out before me, endless and empty. It was Christmas Eve, and I was on my way to my parents' house for our annual family gathering. The drive was long, 3 hours through winding country roads, but the thought of home, warm food, and familiar faces made it worth it. Snow was falling steadily, blanketing the world in white. My car's headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the swirling flakes. The radio played Christmas classics, but the festive tunes did little to calm my growing unease. Something about the night felt off. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I told myself it was just the isolation, the eerie quiet of the road. No one else was out here this late on Christmas Eve. And then I saw him. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light. A figure stood on the shoulder of the road, barely visible through the falling snow. I slowed the car, squinting to get a better look. The figure was wearing a red suit, the kind you'd expect to see on a mall Santa. But something about it wasn't right. The suit was dirty, the fabric frayed at the edges, and the fur trim was stained yellow. As I got closer, I noticed the figure wasn't standing. It was swaying, as if caught in an invisible wind. The head was tilted at an unnatural angle, and the shoulders were hunched. My stomach twisted. I knew I should keep driving, but curiosity got the better of me. I slowed to a crawl, rolling down my window just a crack. "Hey!" I called out. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" The figure didn't respond. It just stood there, swaying. The closer I got, the more wrong it looked. Its hands were too long, the fingers thin and claw-like, ending in blackened nails. The head turned slightly and I caught a glimpse of its face. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't a face, it was a mask. A cheap plastic Santa mask with hollow eye sockets and a fixed. The edges of the mask were cracked, revealing dark, withered skin beneath. The figure moved then, taking a single, jerky step toward my car. My instincts screamed at me to leave, and I slammed on the gas, my tires skidding on the icy road as I sped away. In my rearview mirror, I saw the figure step into the road, its head tilting to watch me as I disappeared into the night. The rest of the drive was a blur. My hands shook on the steering wheel, and I couldn't stop glancing at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that thing chasing me. But the road remained empty, the snow falling heavier now, obscuring everything around me. When I finally reached my parents' house, the sight of the warm lights in the windows should have been comforting. Instead, it filled me with a strange dread. The snow-covered driveway was empty, which was odd. My parents and my brother should have arrived by now. I parked and hurried to the front door, my boots crunching in the snow. The house was eerily quiet as I stepped inside, the familiar smell of pine and cinnamon doing little to ease my nerves. "Mom? Dad?" I called out, my voice echoing in the stillness. No answer. The living room was perfectly decorated, as always. The Christmas tree stood in the corner, its lights twinkling softly. Stockings were hung on the mantel, and the dining table was set for dinner. But the house felt wrong, like it was holding its breath. I checked the kitchen, the bedrooms, even the basement. No one was here. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out to see a text from my mom. "Running late. Be there soon. Stay safe. Love you." I let out a shaky breath. Maybe they'd been delayed by the snow. I tried to convince myself there was nothing to worry about, but the memory of the figure on the road lingered in my mind. I decided to wait in the living room, pouring myself a glass of wine to calm my nerves. The hours ticked by and the snowstorm outside grew fiercer. The wind howled, rattling the windows, and the power flickered once, twice before going out entirely. The house plunged into darkness, the only light coming from the faint glow of the Christmas tree. I lit a few candles and sat back down, pulling a blanket over my shoulders. My phone buzzed again, a text from my brother this time. "We're almost there. Save me some eggnog." I stared at the message, a knot forming in my stomach. Something was wrong. My brother never drank eggnog, he hated it. It was a family joke we'd teased him about for years. I texted back asking where they were, but the message didn't send. And then I heard it. Footsteps. They were slow, deliberate, coming from somewhere outside the house. My breath caught and I turned toward the window, peering out into the snow. At first I saw nothing, but then, in the faint glow of the porch light, I saw him again. The Santa figure stood at the edge of the yard, just beyond the reach of the light. He was closer now, his red suit tattered and fluttering in the wind. He tilted his head, as if he could see me watching him. I backed away from the window, my heart racing. The footsteps continued, louder now, coming from the porch. I grabbed a fire poker from the hearth, clutching it tightly as I moved toward the front door. The doorknob rattled, and I froze. "Hello?" a voice called out. It was my brother's voice. "It's me. Let me in." Relief washed over me, but it was quickly replaced by doubt. Something about his voice was wrong. It was flat, emotionless, like he was reciting the words from memory. "Prove it's you," I shouted, my voice trembling. There was a pause, and then the voice spoke again. "Come on, it's freezing out here. Let me in." I gripped the fire poker tighter, stepping closer to the door. "If you're really my brother, what's your nickname for me?" Another pause, longer this time. Then in a low, rasping voice, "Let me in." The doorknob rattled violently, and I stumbled back. The pounding started then, heavy and relentless, shaking the door on its hinges. I ran to the back of the house, locking every door and window I could find. The pounding followed me, moving from door to door, window to window. And then it stopped. The silence was worse than the noise. I stood in the kitchen, gripping the fire poker, straining to hear anything over the sound of my own breathing. A whisper came from behind me. "You've been very naughty." I spun around, and there he was. The figure stood in the shadows of the kitchen, his plastic Santa mask glinting in the candlelight. His long, claw-like fingers reached for me, and his glowing red eyes burned into mine. I screamed and swung the fire poker, but it passed through him like smoke. He laughed, a low, guttural sound that filled the room. "You'll stay with me," he said, his voice echoing in my head, "forever." The last thing I saw before the darkness swallowed me was the mask, its twisted grin stretching wider as the world around me faded. When my family arrived the next morning, they found the house empty. The Christmas tree was still lit, the table set for dinner, but there was no sign of me. And in the snow outside, leading away from the house, were a single set of footprints, heavy, deliberate, and impossibly long.